With me now is Victor Cha, Korea Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and a former National Security Council Director for Asian Affairs. He's also an MSNBC analyst. The panel is still here. Sahil, Stephanie, Danny. Victor, let me get the Otto Warmbier thing out of the way first. It's probably the reason why there isn't more praise for the president in walking away from this deal, because that was just a reminder that he seems to believe anybody who says nice things about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. The president in 2017 was saying all sorts of things about human rights, invited Otto's parents to the State of the Union speech. But once he met Kim, he stopped talking about human rights. And when it was raised here, he acts as though it's like not his problem anymore, when it was just a horrible performance in that regard.
Does that have any bearing on negotiations going forward? I mean, is there any sort of strategic reason why he would back off that we should know about, or give him any benefit of doubt on, or no?
Well, again, I think he's trying to protect the North Korean leader and not offend him, because he thinks there's still a chance for a deal. But what we've seen through two summits is this sort of bromance between the two of them is not getting this country to give up its nuclear weapons. And it became evidently clear at this meeting in Hanoi, where, they were just, we were just not prepared. We were not prepared for what the North Koreans put on the table.
Right.
And then in the end, the only thing that saved the president was that it was such a bad deal that the North Koreans put on the table that we had to walk away. So that saved him. But, if
do you think the president wanted a deal and Mike Pompeo basically stopped it?
I mean, it's entirely possible, but it was a pretty bad deal, Chuck. It was pretty bad. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was a -5. But again, the problem is, the president wants to do this all himself. He doesn't let his people do the spade work to ensure that there is something there that he can work with when he gets to the table. And then you get outcomes like this. There was a lot of pressure on this summit to achieve something tangible, because the first summit was just a broad statement of principles. So this was actually much more important than the first summit, and we got absolutely nothing.
How do you expect North Korea to respond to the president now walking away? I mean, should we expect missile tests to come back?
I don't think so. I mean, right now, from all the imagery that we've looked at, the commercial imagery, most of the sites remain pretty dormant. They could, of course, heat up if the North Koreans wanted them to do it. But right now, it looks like they're going to hold on testing as long as there's a dialogue taking place. Mike Pompeo, Steve Biegun. But we have to make a decision about whether we're going to resume exercises with South Korea. The president impulsively stopped those in Singapore. And so that's another question, because if we do that, the North Koreans are going to see that as a provocation, even though those are perfectly legal defensive exercises we do to maintain readiness on the peninsula.
Danny, there was a palpable sense of relief, Democrat and Republican alike, that there was no deal this morning.
Well, the problem with Donald Trump, right? Yeah. The problem with Donald Trump is you never know what he's going to do. We don't have confidence that he's listening to his advisors. We don't have confidence that his advisors were believed to be people who had his authority when they were negotiating with the North Koreans. And Donald Trump doesn't understand what he's doing. The Otto Warmbier thing, it looks like a one-off terrible thing, but no, it should color our understanding of Donald Trump, the negotiator. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Stephanie.
I agree.
That's what when I say united Democrat and Republican alike. This walk away the Hill today, it was like beyond. You saw everybody going. Yeah. It's good that he walked away from a deal, because he doesn't like to walk away from a signing ceremony. He wanted some pomp and circumstance.
Right. I'm really struck by the fact that there have been two face-to-face meetings between Trump and Kim now, and there's no path to resolving the basic conundrum that has existed for years, which is that Kim is not going to give up his nuclear weapons without major economic sanctions relief. He looks at Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi and said, that's not going to happen to me. These are the one thing, these nuclear weapons are the one thing preventing the Americans from coming here and doing regime change and taking me out. And the president is not going to give him sanctions relief without some concrete commitment that he can't walk away from in bad faith.
Victor, I want to end with you on this. The South Koreans want this to continue. They want the talks to continue. They clearly, this is an administration, the Moon administration, clearly, he wants action. He wants some relief. They want to do something here. Does that mean they actually will ask the United States not to resume military exercises?
I mean, that's possible. I think they would probably be in favor of not resuming the exercises. I think, they were completely freaked out about what happened last night, the sudden ending of the summit. I think
they were upset that it just ended, right? They wanted any deal, didn't they?
They wanted a deal. They wanted a peace declaration and a deal. And so I think they're going to come to Washington, see the president. They're going to go to the North Koreans. They're going to go to the Chinese and try to pick up the pieces of this diplomacy.
All right, Victor Cha, I'm going to leave it there, but I'm glad we left it reminding people the South Koreans are driving this in some ways more so than the Trump administration. Anyway, Victor Cha, much appreciated. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.